Hey guys, happy Wonderland Wednesday. It is our usual time, 6 p.m., and welcome to another episode of Inside Alicyn's Wonderland. Starting to get into the groove of this whole Wednesday, 6 p.m. thing. So I want to say thank you to everyone that's tuning in live. Hey, Carrie. Hey, Jeff. It's good to see you guys. We have a very special guest today. I'm really excited. Today we're going to sit down with the game director and narrative co-lead on a brand new video game that just dropped today, The Outer Worlds Peril on Gorgon, which is the new DLC for The Outer Worlds, award-winning video game by Obsidian that came out last year in 2019, and they just released a new DLC. So I'm really excited to have Carrie join us today. I'm going to go ahead and add her to our call, and we're going to jump right in. Now, Carrie and I have never met in person, and she's obviously been working on this game for quite a long time. So I'm really excited to hear all about it. Hi.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm good. Happy Wednesday.
Thank you, and happy release day.
Thank you. Yes, I guess that's something that I didn't mention is that I actually did one of the voices on the game. So that was really exciting. And Carrie has been, working on this game probably quite a while, huh? Now you worked on the original Outer Worlds, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what was that process like?
it was exciting, and it was definitely, I think it definitely helped transition into this role, having
Hmm.
worked on the base game as a senior narrative designer. I was familiar with the content, familiar obviously with, the style of our narrative, the lore in the world, and that made it easier to understand, what was going to be expected for DLC content, and to give players more of what they really enjoyed in the outer worlds. And our story, characters, and dialogue were some of the most praised elements.
Yes.
So yeah. So that
You
that was
you guys won a
yeah.
Nebula Award for writing,
We
which
did, we
pretty
did.
exciting. So how many years did you work on that game?
Let's see. I joined the Outer Worlds just before Pillars of Eternity to Deadfire shipped. So I believe that was around like April of 2018.
Okay.
And we shipped the Outer Worlds in October of 2019. And I rolled off of at the end it's mostly just a lot of bug fixing and polish stuff.
Okay.
So I was working on the DLC a little bit just before that shipped. But yeah,
Wow. So you guys are already prepping for that when the first thing is wrapping up.
we try to. I mean,
Yeah.
it's obviously more challenging to manage multiple teams and to have multiple content teams going on at once. But the nice thing about a game production process is as you get to the end, and again, you do not have as much production work going on. You're not trying to build new things. You're really just trying to clean up the things you already have. It's easier to move people off of one project and onto something else.
Hmm. Now, a game like that, how big is your team that's working on it? I mean, obviously there's multiple components. How many people does it take to get a game like that off the ground?
Ooh, I gotta think. So the team size fluctuates quite a bit over the course of development. I think on the base game we had something like maybe a bit over 80 people maybe closer to 90 people at the peak. For the DLC,
Wow.
I think we had 35, maybe close to 40 at a certain point. But yeah, I mean, it's usually you've got kind of the bulge in the middle. You start lean with your pre-production team. You ramp up the most in the middle of production, and then again once you get to the end, you start tapering off some more.
So how do you come up with story ideas? Do you guys work as a team?
We do, yeah. And that's one of the really fun things about, working in games and it being so collaborative. We knew from the base game that there were particular aspects of the lore that we'd sort of hinted at, we hadn't really delved into fully. And I think by the time we were really working on the DLC, we had a good idea of what kind of content, players responded well to. And, we know between flavor and tone, and also just, the style of more open-ended player-driven stories that allow players to, try different things and really feel like they're pushing things forward. So I think you start with a lot of criteria for what you want to make and how you want to make it. And you go from there and see kind of what room you have to play in.
That's fun. How did you get into the whole gaming industry? Is this something you always wanted to do?
Sort of. It's one of those things where I grew up enjoying video games and computer games. I also,
Anything in particular that you loved?
you know, um, when I was young, I really liked the old Sierra adventure games like King's Quest and Quest for Glory. You just a lot of it was typing stuff into the text box and interacting with the
Mhm.
world that way. And it's very interesting to look back at the design of those games because they're very punishing in a way. Like it's very easy to miss something that's important in a way that you don't necessarily know. And I feel like one thing, we've that I certainly see, designers taking great care with nowadays is, trying to be very, very fair and careful with the player so that you're not letting people back themselves into corners that they can't see, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense to me. Um, because you don't want to trap someone down an end that there is no recovering from.
Exactly, exactly.
Or maybe you do. Maybe you're like a sadistic game designer.
I mean, I think you always like it is fun to surprise players, but I think players have a very finely tuned sense of fairness. And I some game I always admire games that manage to um, I, I guess challenge players in ways that remain fair. You when you look back and you say, "Oh, I made a mistake here," but the signs were there. The game taught me what to do, but in the moment I let this other instinct get the better of me.
That's
But
so
players are very
cool.
sophisticated about that now.
And so did you study video games in school or?
I did not. Let's see, I studied international relations, English, and Spanish in school. I worked at an accounting firm for a couple years, and then I focused on my own writing for a couple of years. And I enjoyed working on my own writing, but I did miss the collaborative aspect.
Yeah.
Working with other people, working with a team. And so I honestly got very fortunate as to when I applied at Obsidian, and the timing there is they were looking to hire for someone for the first Pillars of Eternity game,
Hmm.
and I had a short story sample that I think stylistically was in line with what they were looking for in a writer, um, and yeah, I've been here ever since.
And so you have, our viewers that don't know, you have a trilogy out, the Recoleta series. Am I
I
pronouncing
do.
that correctly? Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So it's sort of a speculative fiction mystery thriller type series. The first one is called The Buried Life, and it takes place in an underground city where the study of history is outlawed. And it's I think the genre actually changes a little bit from one book to the next as the situation the characters are in evolves. I know that sounds rather vague. I'm trying not to give too much away though for anyone who hasn't picked it up. But yeah,
Yeah. And where can we pick it up?
anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local independent bookseller. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you started with, did you always know that it was going to be a trilogy, or did you start with one book and it just sort of became a trilogy?
I started with one and had a vague idea of, well, this might be fun to write more. And then I remember when I submitted it to Angry Robot, who ended up publishing it. They were looking at I think a revision or something, and they got back to me and they said, "Hey, we like the full manuscript. Question: Have you thought about writing any sequels to this?" And then it's like, well, the correct answer is yes. Yes, of course I have.
Of
And they're like,
course.
"Oh, great. Well, can you send us the outline?" Sure. And then you write the
And then you write
outline.
the outline.
Yeah.
What amazing good fortune, though.
I know. Yeah.
Especially, I wonder what your old bosses at the accounting firm were thinking when you're like, peace, guys.
I realized I was very fortunate to have the support I did with my spouse, and to
Yeah.
be in a good position to be able to do that. But yeah, it was, I realized the accounting firm just wasn't quite the right fit for me, and I was just very lucky to be able to move into something and try something that I liked a
Yeah.
lot better.
Do you have any advice for a young Carrie or another person out there that might be at that accounting firm and looking to segue, or somebody young just starting out?
I guess I would say don't cut all those tethers immediately.
Hmm.
Like I wrote for years, while I was in school, while I was, working in accounting, basically. Before I said, let me just take some time and try to really focus on that. And in a lot of ways, it was harder and more frustrating than I think I expected it to be.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to expect, oh, well, if I can write this many words in like the time that I carve out right now, if I have this much more time, you take that factor and I'll make that many more words. And it is not always the case. Um, Structure is really important. And in a lot of ways, like I was still writing when I came over to Obsidian. I finished my second and third books while I was working here. And it was, obviously finding the time for that was a challenge, but I do believe that having to develop that structure around my writing time was super helpful.
That's so interesting. Um, so yes, I'm just so curious. Now, you started as, a co-lead and working on the Outer Worlds, and then you became the game director. Now, I'm just curious, how would you define your, and for those of you guys that are just joining in, we're interviewing Carrie Patel, who is the game director and narrative co-lead on the new Outer Worlds Peril on Gorgon DLC that just dropped today. So I'm curious, just what does that entail? Because I know there's also like a director that directs the actors, but that's different
Mm-hmm.
than the overall game director. So how does that how do those jobs break down?
So the game director is basically the creative vision holder for the project. You're partnered with an executive producer. Basically, they're the production side of
Mhm.
project leadership, and the game director decides is sort of in charge of setting out what we're making, and the production director is in charge of figuring out how we're going to make it in time. And they run the schedule, and they help us understand the resources that we have, so that we know what we can make and polish and deliver on. And it's actually a really awesome partnership. So it's tricky because before I started doing this job, I think I was under the impression of like, oh man, but I don't know when I would know enough about programming and art and writing and level design and audio and all these things, because I just assumed that like the game director has to know everything about everything. But
Yeah.
of course that's not true, because almost nobody in the industry has that breadth of experience in so
Hmm.
many discrete disciplines. So I think a lot about succeeding in the job is about, some of it is delegation, but some of it is also understanding what you don't know, understanding how to ask the questions to get what you need to know, and then like figuring out what's the stuff I need to know to make a decision around this. And let me get that information instead of assuming that I'm going to come out of this conversation with full knowledge of programming's pipelines.
That's so interesting. Yeah. And so then I assume just the more you do it, the more your depth grows. So you already have this breadth of knowledge, and then you become even
Mm-hmm.
deeper with that. That's
And
amazing.
that is one of the nice things about starting in direction on a DLC, is because there's a lot about the infrastructure and the architecture of your game that is already figured out, and stuff that you don't have to reinvent the wheel on. But yeah, there is so much already that just having gone through this one time, it's like, okay, I know in the future these are things to do, these are things to ask about, things to look for.
Hmm.
And yeah, a lot of it, like you said, you really just do get that by experience and practice.
Now, I see overhyped gamer. You don't worry about looking at the comics if you need to. I'll keep an eye on them. But he said it's one of the best writing and stories he's ever experienced.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's a huge compliment. For those
Yeah.
people that have not downloaded the DLC yet, do you want to give them like a brief overview of what happens in the story? Or...
Sure. So Peril on Gorgon is a noir-themed DLC for the Outer Worlds. Um, it is set primarily on the Gorgon asteroid in Halcyon, and it you you get into it through an old friend of Alex Hawthorne's, and you're sent on a journey to a now shut down Spacer's Choice research facility where Spacer's Choice was developing adrenatime. And a wealthy heiress, played by you, Alicyn Packard, um, basically wants you to help find closure around her mother, who was the lead researcher who was blamed for the project's failures. So it's a very personal story for the characters involved, but it's also a story about, the setting of Halcyon and how certain things got to be the way they are.
And how did you kind of tonally? I feel like it's very unique, and I love the space that you're living in. I'm curious how you kind of extended what was set with Outer Worlds in terms of like sarcasm and, that whole
Mm-hmm.
the comedy within sort of the unfolding of the story. How you balance that with the new DLC, which kind of has this more noir-y vibe.
Yeah. So I think one thing there. So when we were looking at kind of developing our story pitch for the DLC, one idea that came from Kate Dollarhide, our other narrative co-lead on the project, was basically the idea of the Manhattan Project, and this idea of these very brilliant people who worked on something that is in many ways terrible, and then how they like what the aftermath of that is, both personally and for the world that they live in. And so there was a lot there that just, for us, I think, like tonally and stylistically, synced very well with the Outer Worlds as, a setting that's actually very dark, despite having a lot of lighthearted humor.
Hmm. Hmm.
The idea that corporate ambition is what drives,
Hmm.
what drives most things in Halcyon. Um,
In America? Oh, sorry, Halcyon.
right? It does feel very different making this in 2020, but yeah. Um, yeah, and so there seemed to be a lot of overlap between those spaces. And as far as sort of the pulp noir, one of the things that I think is very fun about the Outer Worlds aesthetically is the pulp sci-fi approach. And I think there are a few flavors of sort of pulp noir that intersect with that space, just
Hmm.
enough so that I think we were able to hit, and also very much thanks to the excellent art direction of Matt Hansen, a really nice blend of something that meshes with the base game, but still feels a little bit stylistically distinct, which I think is a nice balance for a DLC to hit.
Hmm. And so to talk a little bit more about Matt and his design, what do you know about his process in approaching the new worlds and the new characters?
So I know, we with it being a little more noir themed, we wanted to have a lot of fun with like light and shadow and kind of these strong contrasts in our areas. And so Gorgon is an asteroid. It's like it's an asteroid. It's this canyon with these big dramatic walls, and both visually and tonally things there are very shady. But then there are these very bright, vivid pockets of like this fungal cover grass
Mm.
that's very visually distinct in the overlands, and the facades of the different Spacer's Choice facilities are very opulent and really stand out in the environment. And so I think for him, one thing he said is exploring those contrasts was a good way to get to kind of develop some of those different ideas.
Mm. Great. Yeah, I think a lot of people really resonated with as Overhyped Gamer is saying, the characters and just you end up feeling empathy and a strong connection to them as you're going through the game. And I think for those of you, the original Outer Worlds was the Nebula Award winner for Best Writing in a Video Game in 2019, I believe. And you were also nominated for a WGA Award for Best Writing. So you're just like cleaning up. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Was for which game? The WGA?
That was for Pillars of Eternity and
Pillars of
Deadfire.
Okay, cool. Oh, so now the statistics, I was looking at like some of the statistics of women that work in video games. And what I was looking at is in development worldwide in 2019, it was about 25%. So does that ring true with what you have seen and experienced?
It's hard to say. I mean, every studio is a little bit different, obviously. I think more women are definitely finding opportunities in the industry right now, but certainly in my experience, there are more guys in the industry at this point. But I think we're getting more diverse, which is fantastic.
And you also mentioned Kate, which was one of your co-writers, I believe, and another woman on the project. So it seems that Obsidian for sure is bringing diverse female voices and some different voices to the forefront. Have you faced any challenges in being a woman working in the video game industry?
Personally, I've been very fortunate. I know we're having a reckoning with a lot of stories of what some women in the industry have faced. I've been lucky to be very supported in my career, to have a very healthy work environment, and to have the support of some really great mentors. Who treat me with a lot of professionalism and respect, and have really encouraged me to grow my career here.
Was there any mentors in particular early in your career that sort of changed the script for you?
Let's see. Well, working on Pillars, I worked a lot with Eric Fenstermaker, who was the narrative lead on the first project, and with Josh Sawyer, the game director on both projects. And I have learned so much from the two of them, and been incredibly empowered by both of them.
Now, for anyone that's just tuning in, we're with Carrie Patel. She's the, you never know who's just jumping in. She's the game director and narrative co-lead on the new Outer Worlds. And look, the Outer Worlds just commented that it feels nostalgic and comfortable to be back for the game. I think that's the Outer Worlds fan page, I believe.
Nice.
So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Now, for anybody that is curious, maybe tuning in for the first time and doesn't have the Outer Worlds, can they access the DLC, or they buy the original game and then purchase the DLC? How does that work?
You do have to buy the original game. The DLC is not a standalone. It's content that you access through the main game. And for anyone who has played, you can start at any time between the end of the Monarch critical path, the end of Radio Free Monarch, and then your point of no return save that's generated at the very end of the base game.
Okay. Yeah. And then what platforms is it available on today?
Xbox, PC, and PlayStation.
Somebody's asking if there'll be a version of the game for PS5.
I don't really know. I'm not part of any next gen discussions, unfortunately.
And is it going to be coming to Nintendo Switch too?
Yes, it will be.
Okay. Cool. And so for our listeners that are looking to connect with you personally, I know you're not super active on Instagram. How can they kind of follow up about your writing and, everything that you have going on in your world?
The best way would be on Twitter. I'm at Carrie_Patel.
Okay. And is that just the regular spelling? Okay. P-A-T-E. Yeah.
Yes. No okay. 3 in my name as I had for Instagram.
Hi guys. Now I'm upside down. So is there anything else about the game that you would like to share with us?
I'm really excited for players to discover it for themselves. I know we put a lot of heart into what we made. I think there's a lot of fun, a lot of humor, a really exciting new world in Gorgon. And just a lot of attention to the details in the visual storytelling, and in the way that we try to build our characters and their story through, a lot of the side and found content. And there is one particular hidden path through the game that players who try to color outside the lines a little bit may discover. I'm super proud of. Really embraces the kind of player freedom that we try to offer with our RPGs. But I don't want to spoil that. I want people to discover that for themselves.
You heard it here first, folks.
You might know what I mean, though. Yeah,
I might, but I would never say. And so, moving forward, then, do you just go on vacation? I mean, not that we can really go too many places, but are you already rolling in, or are you continuing to work on the Outer Worlds from this point on as we patch forward?
So next week I'm going on vacation.
Yes.
I think this will be, yeah, the first vacation I've taken like outside of the holidays, since quarantine. Just planning to stay local, maybe do some hikes, just simple isolated things like that. And then after that I'll be helping out with the second DLC, which will be coming a little bit later.
Yeah, that's exciting. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Nope.
We one step at a time, guys.
Right?
One step at a time. Well, that's very exciting. Does anyone that's tuning in right now have any specific questions for Carrie or about the game that maybe she can answer, but potentially not?
I'll try.
We've already taken that. The question about PS5. Does anybody else have any? I'm curious. So your average day, what does your average day look like?
It changes a ton from one phase of production to the next. And, I look at, my days these last few weeks, and then I think back to, what the day looked like even, 2 months ago, and it's night and day. When I'm wearing my narrative designer hat, it's a lot of, reviewing story and lore documents or writing those things. Let's see, a lot of writing character dialogue, testing and playing in game to make sure that we're telling. And then, direction, it's a lot of, reviewing the content that's going in all across the game. A lot of meetings to, keep up with the various developers and departments that are working on the content, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure that I know where the content is at any given time. It's definitely exciting. I think definitely more so than any other role I've been in, with direction. Every day feels different because, you're really, a lot of it is solving problems. And so, you spend your time on whatever needs to be accomplished right then.
Is it very stressful?
It can be, yeah. It's stressful and exciting. Because again, on some level, you're responsible for things that you are not necessarily an expert in. Definitely things you're not an expert in, but you have to figure out how to gain enough familiarity with the underlying problem to help make good decisions.
It's interesting to have a career where you really have a completion and you have an end date, you have a launch date, and then it's out there. I mean, that's so exciting. But so much of your work and life energy has gone into this project, and now here it is. Today's your day. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you, and congratulations to you.
Thank you. Richard Anthony Granger was wondering if you had any personal inspirations for PERIL on Gorgon.
Again, I think the idea of sort of this, we wanted to play with the idea of pulp noir, but not take it in like the, lowercase c cyberpunk direction. Just, wanted to find something that had sort of a more old school pulpy feel that seemed in sync with the Outer Worlds. And again, I think Kate's, more narrative inspiration around the Manhattan Project and telling a story of complex characters and their regrets or lack thereof,
Mm-hmm.
I think was really interesting to me.
Great. And then another question was asking, and this is a really good question. What are the challenges of working in the current situation with quarantine and not being able to go into the office?
Honest. Yeah, that changed a ton for us. Yeah, we went home for quarantine, I think like the second week in March, maybe,
Yeah.
which was, man, it feels like such a long time ago. We'd been working a ton in the office, but we have done more of our production, like more of our development process for Gorgon has taken place at home than it did at the office, which is kind of to think about. Um, it definitely meant that we all had to a lot more proactive about communicating. So I think in a lot of ways, it definitely, improved our communication habits, because you knew you had to go out of your way to make sure to stop with people. I mean, the downside, for the most part, our mornings would be just full of quick sync meetings. So it would be hard to just focus and get something done. But on the other hand, I think, again, especially with everyone in the office being split up now, we managed to stay connected very well. We took our work PC, most of us took our work PCs home. Some
Mm-hmm.
people would VPN in if they had a machine that could do what they needed to do. Got webcams and headsets so that we can, talk like this on a regular basis multiple times a day. But yeah, it is it is really impressive how much the team was able to stay on track, despite the setback. And I think the studio has been very supportive too, with in terms of helping us get the equipment we need to be effective from home, and also just making time and space for people to, attend to sick family members, take care of their own business, childcare, family needs, anything else like that.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, it really takes a village, as they
Mm-hmm.
say. Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Well, thank you for
Um,
having me.
I'm really impressed and congratulations. So
Thank you so much.
I'm excited to see the next DLC too, but I can't wait to see this one
Mm-hmm.
first. So um, let me know if you need anything, guys. A collector's edition. One suggestion for Outer Worlds 2, make a collector's edition for fans. Wrap it in gold, I don't know. Maybe
Will do.
include a bit of space rock with it. Well, thank you guys so much. I'll post this broadcast so that you can go back if you missed the beginning and access it at any time. And thank you so much, Carrie, for coming and chatting with us.
Thank
Have
you.
a great rest of your day.
You
Okay,
too.
bye.